guys? This is the latest deep dive of unfinished business for our Halloween month. And I am your co host, Andre Joseph of AJ Epics Productions. And as always, we got the main man right here, Mr. Jeff Galashaw. Say hello.
Hey, everybody, welcome back.
Yes, and today's deep dive, we're going back to the 90s. And, one of the last ones I picked was Sleeping with the Enemy. So now we're going to do another Fatal Attraction knockoff from this period, but we're going to go a little bit more Generation X this time around. And I'm talking about a movie called Fear from 1996, directed by James Foley. And it was one of the very first starring roles of Marky Mark himself, Mark Wahlberg, and Reese Witherspoon before she blew up in the later part of the decade with movies like Election and, of course, her blockbuster role in Legally Blonde. And this is a movie that I remember was probably one of the first R-rated films I saw in the theater. Not the very first. I mean, RoboCop 2 and other movies. But in terms of this genre, it was definitely one of the first films I've seen in the theater. And I got some stories I'll share about that later. So what is this movie about? It's essentially, it takes place in Seattle, from what I remember. And Reese Witherspoon is a teenage girl. Her father, played by William Petersen, he's like a workaholic dad. He's got this girlfriend played by Brennaman, who at the time I think was on NYPD Blue and had just left the show around that period. She has a little brother, and she misses her mom who had passed away, but she and her dad don't really see eye to eye because he's constantly working. The girlfriend, they kind of have a relationship, but then they don't. And so what happens? She befriends Alyssa Milano's character, who's sort of
they were already friends.
Yeah, but she was kind of like the bad girl between the two. And then they go out to this club and she meets Marky Mark's character named David, who seems like this charming, good-looking guy, a little bit on the edge, but seems to have like a good heart on him. And they hook up, they have a relationship, they get sexy with each other without the dad knowing. She's sneaking out the house to go see him, so she's kind of like breaking the rules to see him. But then she starts to see he's got this dark, sinister side about him when he attacks her male friend, who he's thinking is trying to hit on her, and in the process of attacking him, he punches her in the face. And so now the dad gets worried. He already doesn't trust this kid, but now he really doesn't trust this kid. And she forgives him very quickly because, oh, no, that's not him. It was just an accident, this and that. He apologized to me. But then little by little, we start to find out that Marky Mark's character does have this real serious, crazy side to himself where he's stalking her. He's got these group of meth head friends that are, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. He's having a thing with Alyssa Milano's character, and he rapes her. And everything starts to come around where she realizes she's got to get away from this guy. And by that point, it's too late because then he wants to really not just keep her forever, but he's willing to kill anybody near her who's willing to keep them separate from each other. That's in a nutshell is what Fear is. It's basically Marky Mark is playing Glenn Close, Reese Witherspoon is Michael Douglas, William Petersen is Ann Archer. That's the nutshell of what this movie is. And I remember the trailers when they came out because, again, it was the 90s. It was Mark Wahlberg at that point was only still known as a rapper. He hadn't done many movies to that point. He had done Renaissance Man with Danny DeVito. He was in some USA TV movie for a small part, like this naughty teacher type of film.
Oh, The Substitute with Amanda.
Yes, another movie with that same title.
Amanda Donovan.
He was also in the Basketball Diaries with DiCaprio. And the funny thing is, DiCaprio was up for this role and didn't think he was right for it, so he suggested Mark Wahlberg, and then James Foley loved his audition so much he said, I'm not doing this movie unless this kid's doing it. So James Foley is to credit for having Marky Mark on the big screen and shedding that image to become this box office draw of an actor. I mean, depending on how you perceive it, but this is basically the film that made him a star, and he had a relationship with Reese Witherspoon for a short time after this. So Jeff, let's talk to you about your feelings about Fear.
Okay, just to co-sign on what you said, I like that you refer to him as Marky Mark because that was how I was introduced to him. B, Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah, the whole story you said was right, but also don't forget Leonardo DiCaprio was up for Boogie Nights originally, and then Marky Mark or Mark Wahlberg ended up getting that role. When it comes to fear, this is one of my favorite bad teen movies because I saw this movie quite a few times in theaters because I saw it, when it was at the regular price theater. And then I saw it many times when it was at the like $2 or whatever the price was, the cheaper ticket theater. And I will tell you the one thing that kept bringing me back, Alyssa Milano in this movie. Because first of all, I know she was in it before seeing it, but you think, oh, Alyssa Milano, okay, she'll play a friend or it'll be, but this was at the end of her, I think, straight to home video being sexy phase. And this is like when she could make it back into studio films. And oh my God, she was a femme fatale in this movie. So I was like, whoa, I want to keep watching this movie. Other than that, I'll get more into that later. But my thoughts on the film were, I didn't know exactly what to expect. I knew, obsessive love. But I will say, even though everybody else was impressed by Mark Wahlberg in The Basketball Diaries, this is the movie that impressed me, except for certain moments in this film. Watching the movie, by the end, I was like, he could be an action star. I'll give him that because of the physicality. Like when, are we doing spoiler alert for this?
Yeah, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it.
Okay. Like when she kills his friend, like, where is he getting all these angles and all this like agility from? I was like, damn, it was a kung fu movie almost. The way he just snaps his neck like that. It wasn't the first time he's done this. So, and then the infamous thing that's in the trailer, but obviously censored, when they're doing the fisheye lens and he's looking through the, and he's like, "Let me in a fucking house." It's just hilarious.
He improvised that. Apparently, they kept it. It was supposed to be a joke.
And no, and it's like, oh my God, this is so like, I know it's supposed to be a scary moment, but you can't help but laugh the way it looks. And towards the end, his character gets stabbed by what looks like kind of a spear out of nowhere that's in her room. And the way he takes it, it's just like she just punched him. And it's like, what's this? This is nothing, And I'm trying to think of another good Mark Wahlberg moment in this movie. There's so many. Yeah. Oh, when he does what I call the Matthew McConaughey early chest bash, where you're like, where the father's just had this stern talk with him, and then all of a sudden he just is hitting his chest, and you're like, is this a macho thing? What's going on here? Then you find out what it was supposed to be. It was like, that was so lame, though, later in the story. But I will say, in this movie has one of the most shocking scenes I've ever seen in film. Mm-hmm. In a movie that, even though it's rated R, is aimed at teenagers. Yeah. The infamous roller coaster fingering scene. Because at first, you're wondering, what are they? They're smiling at each other. And it's like, oh, you kind of get what they're doing. It's like, is it allowed in this movie? And it's one of the more erotic scenes in the whole film. There is sex, obviously, since you detailed what happens to Alyssa Milano's character. But this is like kind of the most graphic sexually it gets. But also, let's talk about that rape scene. First of all, what drugs are they doing when he comes into the scene? Because he's just sitting there smoking something. It's never detailed what they're smoking. Oh, that's supposed to be crack?
Yeah.
See, I'm shocked they could get away with that in a 1996 movie. Yeah. And Marky Mark just literally picks her up, puts her over to this after he professed his love to Nicole, by the way. Mm-hmm. And then just to add insult to injury that this guy's losing his girl, he does an intentional ass grab and it's just like, this is mine now. And then walks away, which then also made me beg the question, how does he know these guys? Because why does he dress normal? And they're all like a punk rock group from 1985. So why is he hanging out with them? And also, you know his backstory was in the original script.
I've heard about this, but you could go ahead and explain it.
Okay, apparently we find out about his past because in the movie he just says, "Oh, my parents, they're hippies, they live in another state." But we find out eventually that his mother was a cheerleader in high school, went to a college party, got gang raped, and then thrown out of her family because she refused to have an abortion, and she had to raise him on her own, and eventually died in a loony bin. And we find out that this wasn't some random act of him meeting Nicole. This was a plan because her father was one of the guys who raped his mother and most likely is his father. So he's doing this all as revenge to get back at him in a weird incestual thing. But
oh boy.
Exactly. Except with, this one doesn't have that happy ending. And I think the studio kind of realized, like, hey, we don't mind the murders and everything, but this is a little too dark. And it would have been a hard sell because then you are making the film have a protagonist who we later find out is a rapist, basically. And that would have been a hard sell, especially when, in the end, he's kind of our hero through all of this film. And what I like is that the film plays up this thriller aspect, but then in the third act becomes a siege movie. As they're trying to break into his impenetrable panic room house. And this is where the film has some interesting choices. Because, first of all, this is the most graphic killing of an animal I've seen in a studio film. Where, hey, look, Ralphie's coming in, and then it's just Ralphie's head. And I was like, I will admit, that was shocking watching it in a theater. I'm just like, damn, they killed the dog. And later, when one of the redheaded got Bill Burr's early cousin shoots the kid, and we're made to think that he's dead, and then he gets up and then uses the car to run over the guy. I think the kid more wanted to kill him because of the dog more than, hey, you're trying to kill my family. I expected there almost to be a line if this was more comedic, like, that was for Ralphie. This movie, I know I'm laughing a lot. It's a movie that's predictable, but it's entertaining as hell, especially for the time period.
Yeah, when I saw this in the theater, so I saw this with my dad when it first came out.
Oh Lord!
And yeah, he tried to censor my eyes when they had the sex scene in there, but the audience I was with, it was cool. It was weirdly cool because they would cheer in the right moments, like when William Petersen is chewing out Wahlberg. It's like, I'm gonna cut your balls off, you get away with my daughter, and they're like cheering for that. They even cheered when the friend got his head snapped. I mean, like the way he got flipped, like a Mortal Kombat scene, and getting his neck snapped.
And he cheered, and jeez, you're crying.
They cheered when the kid killed the guy with the car. Like, and that's the thing. It's like it has. The way they advertise it, they make it seem like it's a Fatal Attraction knockoff. But it seems like it goes from it's a Fatal Attraction type movie to the third act turns into like Straw Dogs and Home Alone, where now they have to take on this entire gang to defend the house and protect Reese Witherspoon's character. So like it becomes like a full-blown action movie at that point with the kid and the kill the dog, the guard of the complex, like he gets involved and you think he's going to get killed early, but then like, oh no, I see you and I'm going to shoot you if you don't do anything, and then he gets shot anyway. And then there was this whole thing, like, honestly, just from even a storyline standpoint, and by the way, when the movie was over, everybody booed. So that tells you how they felt. They were cheering, and then they were like, oh, yeah. They booed at the end when Mark Wahlberg got thrown out the window. But the weird thing about this movie, when I rewatch it again, I find Alyssa Milano more sympathetic than Reese Witherspoon's character. And I think it's just the bias of just being more attracted to Alyssa Milano, but the fact that, she just is caught up in the wrong crowd and then she regrets it and then she loses her friend and, Wahlberg's threatening her life and then she gets beat up near the end. And it's like, you know what? I kind of want to leap on screen and beat the shit out of these guys for attacking her. Like, damn, like, she's hot. Why are you messing around with her like that? So that was kind of like my impression watching it. Like, I like her more than I like the other chick. I mean,
well, I Oh well, okay. The whole. Go ahead. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the reasons why you or most people probably have a problem with Reese Witherspoon's character in this film, she's a whiner. The most movie, Dad, how can you do that to David? Oh, Dad, right there. Dad, I'm like, you live a pretty good life. The only thing is your father doesn't like this dude, who looks 25, always got a tight shirt on, all that's missing is a turtleneck and gold chain for him, realistically. But one of the things I find funny also in this movie is that the gang is upset at the father, willing to kill the whole family because he messed up their apartment or whatever, their clubhouse. And it already looked trash. Yeah. So I'm like, what did he really do? He moved a Chucky doll? And that's what pissed you off? And he broke a mirror? Like, what? Are they that superstitious? Like, oh, man, bad luck now. Which, I mean, eventually happens to all of them.
And I like William Petersen in this movie. I mean, maybe it's because I have a bias, like I liked him in To Live and Die in L.A., but
you were just having those flashbacks, like, yeah.
Well, yeah, there were those moments, like when he's confronting Mark Wahlberg, and he's driving the Mustang. Like, he's not a terrible dad. He's just, he's busy with his job. But then it's like, okay, this guy's messing with my daughter. I'm going to do something about it, and he doesn't take shit from him. So he's a likable dad in this film, in my opinion. He's not like a guy with a stick up his ass.
Well, that's because if this was remade and don't anybody remake it, it's perfect as is.
There is a plan for this. They're going to race, not race versus, they're going to gender swap it.
No. That's every Lifetime TV movie then. But if they were really going to make this for the big screen, like now the William Petersen role would be played by Liam Neeson. Really the
balls removed.
And I feel like Amy Brennaman's only here to have like some sort of tension with the Reese Witherspoon character and be threatened as another victim in the long run because she doesn't really have that much to do. And
it's weird because she seems like she's okay with the relationship. Like, oh no, he's a sweet guy. You should go out and hang out with him. And she's being defensive in front of the father. And yeah, like there was a point I forgot she was in this movie. I thought like she got killed off. That's how unforgettable her character was.
Well, Liv Tyler was the original female lead, or who they wanted, and she turned it down.
Yeah, I don't think Liv Tyler would have worked. I think you needed somebody that looked like they were a girl next door type, and Liv Tyler is just, she's more of a hippie.
Well, I think Liv Tyler would have worked. I think the height thing might have been weird, though, because obviously she's very tall. She's going to tower over Marky Mark. I mean, she's thin, or was thin at that time, so you could believe her more as the fragile, but you wouldn't believe she'd be, like you said, she wouldn't come off as innocent as Reese Witherspoon's, because, Reese Witherspoon's cute. She's small, she has that weird Southern accent, even though they don't come from Seattle, but that's where they live now. And, I was excited because, again, like you said, this was one of Reese Witherspoon's bigger roles because I had remembered her from movies like Man in the Moon and, small supporting roles in, like, I believe it was like Fried Green Tomatoes or one of these Southern.
Yeah, she was in Fried Green Tomatoes.
Yeah, so I remember her from that, playing a young Mary Stuart Masterson. Mm-hmm. So I was happy to see her in it. And the thing that they won't let you forget if you were born back then, how many Bush songs are in this movie on the soundtrack. And at the time, I didn't like Bush, the band. But from this movie, being bombarded with all these Bush songs, it actually made me become a Bush fan because I really liked Machine Head, the theme song of this movie. And then they use Everything Zen in this movie and all these other Bush songs. So I was just like, you know what? This sold me. And if I was ever going to pick a movie of why I like Marky Mark as an actor, this would probably be in that dossier. I'm like, you know what? Marky Mark, I might have some problems with you and the roles you pick, but this was one of those roles where I'm like, you know what? I don't have any problems with you. And,
because it feels like with Marky Mark or, Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah. Sometimes you give him certain roles where if he's close to like his real personality, he can excel. Like you see that in this film, you see it in like Four Brothers, The Departed, even Ted. You know, Ted, they just let the guy naturally be himself, and he shows he's not wooden. And then other times you get like Infinite, where it's like, no, you should not be doing voiceovers. You should not be playing this part. Chris Evans is better for something like this. Part of, you know, even Lovely Bones was miscast. Like,
Yeah,
he's just a guy that he lucks out working with good directors and getting into these big studio projects because he has a look. But then there's really not a whole lot of substance unless you have a good script or a good director behind him. And sometimes you could have all that, and then he ends up getting overshadowed by like Christian Bale in The Fighter.
Which is a shame, because when he was usually in David O. Russell films, he was always playing the outlandish or weird role, where he actually excelled in those movies, in those roles. And it was just so shocking when you're going into The Fighter thinking, oh, David O. Russell's directing, he's going to be the standout. And then it ended up being Christian Bale. And it seemed like he took over for Mark Wahlberg in future David O. Russell films, because then it was like, oh, I need a male lead, I'll just call Christian Bale instead. Yeah. And Mark Wahlberg was like, oh, I'll show you. I'm going back to action, guys. You know? And really, it's been a while since Mark Wahlberg has had like a standout role, really, because he got stuck in like that kind of rock star type role where he plays an everyman who gets these extraordinary things in life. Or now it's like either an action film, or we're supposed to believe him as down on his luck, like in Spencer, where it's like, you got everything going for you. You know, you got looks, you got a job when you come out, you have a sex-crazy, angry girlfriend. You know, the less said about that movie, the better. But
maybe he is our generation's Robert Urich.
Well, except, you know, Mark Wahlberg has a movie career so far. So Robert Urich never broke out of television, unfortunately, really.
Not that Battle... No, it wasn't Battle Beyond the Stars. That one with the space pirates.
Oh, I do not know. Unless you're talking about Buck Rogers.
No, it wasn't Buck Rogers.
I feel like Mark Wahlberg is our Bruce Willis for that next generation, but he's already tired, you know, because we've seen him do almost every type of role, you know, and, you know, Jason Statham is more than a good, you know, British Bruce Willis for all of us. So, you know, you know, one of the reasons I also had faith going into Fear is because it's directed by James Foley, who I remember from directing Glenn Ross. So, but it does at points, you know, it feels like an older person making a teen movie at certain points, because, you know, obviously you're going to have a good lead with William Petersen, who isn't like widely known, you know, as an actor. He doesn't have Robert De Niro, you know, history. But, you know, if you've watched a lot of movies, you know he's a good, sturdy actor. He's always good in a pinch. So it's like one of the few times you actually see him playing a lead. And this is way before he even was on CSI. So, you know. And then, you know, Amy Brennaman, again, I guess female lead. She was one of the hotter actresses at the time, working-wise. And again, you have Mark Wahlberg, who wasn't, you know, originally, they didn't even think they were going to cast him. He was thinking of casting him as one of the other, like, punk thug friends. And then, you know, James Foley went to bat for him, you know, and it worked out nicely. But this is just, like I said, this is just one of those ridiculous movies that is just so watchable for its good points and its bad points. It's one of those movies where you can bring up the bad points, but you're like, you know what? I don't mind that much. It goes with it, you know? And the more ridiculous, even when it gets ridiculous, you're like, hey, you know, I can go with this. And with these plot points, especially now that you're introducing crack, that they were smoking crack, I thought it was like hash or something. I'm like, I don't want to see a remake, but it seems like a movie made before its time. Like, it would probably more fit in right now than it did then, but it works in both time periods.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it goes back to James Foley, because I mean, this is also the guy that gave you At Close Range, which I think was his best film.
Yes.
And he, other than Glengarry Glen Ross, he never really did anything that good after that. It's just a lot of projects and those 50 Shades of Grey sequels. Like this guy, I think he has talent. He deserved better. He did Madonna's videos back in the day. He shot right by my backyard for Papa Don't Preach. Like, what happened to this guy?
Maybe, he got burnt out, or he wasn't getting the projects that were worthy of his talent. I mean, hey, he made this obviously into something, a little bit above normal, above average. It's a worthwhile film. And I mean, it's written by Christopher Crowe, who for some odd reason I thought was Cameron Crowe's brother or something. Who,
with William Dafoe.
Exactly, which is a guilty 80s pleasure for me.
Yeah.
But also, his later work isn't as great as this, because it's like Homeland Security with Martin Lawrence and Steve Zahn. But he did write Last of the Mohicans screen adaptation too. He also did a erotic thriller, wrote erotic thriller, Whispers in the Dark with Annabella Sciorra, if you remember.
Yeah, John Leguizamo. It was terrible.
Yes, but I mean, hey, he knew what he was dealing with. I feel like probably James Foley in the studio cut out that backstory, because I feel like Christopher Crowe was like, "Hey, I'm gonna make this shit disturbing."
And there were supposed to be flashbacks with the mom, the actual the birth mother that they took out. So there was, I guess, a little more substance to this movie that they just said, well, let's just focus on the violence here.
Yeah, I think this is the one time where I'm like, I think the studio made the right decision, because I don't want to see the much darker Fear, because then I'd be like, this is just a fucked up movie. If it was like the original story. The way it is now, I'm like, it's a nice, entertaining afternoon. The way they wanted to make it, I'd be like, oh no, man, that's kind of heavy to watch. It's like you said, I don't want to see an incestuous movie, where incest is part of your revenge. It's like, that sounds more like an Alejandro Jodorowsky film or a David Lynch movie than what we're getting here. And I could just see the studio saying, well, why don't we just flush all our money down the drain with this incest storyline? This is the time I'm glad, more sane heads prevail. But obviously, I would give this movie a very high recommendation. And obviously, well, since you chose it, would you agree?
Yeah, I think, if you're looking for a guilty pleasure, for like a bad movie night or something on a Saturday, you got nothing to do, this is the movie to watch. And also to watch an early Marky Mark and early Reese Witherspoon. It's fun. It's a movie I really do think, as bad as it may be, there are some things about it where at least it tries to do something a little bit different and still comes off in a very entertaining way. And that's all you can really ask for a movie like this.
Oh, and I forgot, looking at my notes, one thing I want to bring up. And also, during this siege, his main homeboy decides, you know what, in the middle of this, I know he's in love with this chick. Let me rape her.
Yeah.
And just how easily and quickly Marky Mark dispatches of him. It's just like, that's fucking cold. That was the last of my notes that we didn't talk about.
There's no black and white in this movie. It's just like nobody likes anybody.
Exactly. They will turn on you at a moment's notice. Other than, this is one of those times where I'm happy again. There are no African American characters in this, because they're not making it. They're not making it till the end credits if they are. I'm like, not even as his assistant at the office, like, hey, Nicole called. Not even that role has an African American.
Totally different times, man.
Exactly. Oh, and the reason why we get this impenetrable house is because he's an architect, and I guess he designed this. And in your audience, did anybody else groan as soon as she gave him the code to the house?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because it was like, hey, they might as well have had a sign saying, this is going to come back later, y'all.
Unlawful entry.
It's like, pay attention. This is meaning something. But yeah, that concludes our business for this week. But as you know, we always have unfinished business. And I have to ask you all out there, let's see, what juicy one can I give you? Have you guys seen To Live and Die in LA? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome. Andre, what film would you like to recommend to the people?
Have you seen the movie At Close Range? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome.
And that concludes our business. See you guys next time for more unfinished business.